The thing about trust is that it takes decades to build and seconds to destroy. I learned that lesson on a cold December evening when I came home early from a business trip to find my entire life was built on a foundation of lies. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when I still believed in the sanctity of marriage and the power of redemption. My name is William Foster, and for 22 years I thought I had everything figured out. I owned Foster Plumbing Services in Columbus, Ohio, built it from one rusty van with a bad transmission to a fleet of 12 trucks with 15 good employees who I treated like family. My hands were still rough and calloused from working the pipes myself because I refused to become just another soft-handed boss who forgot the smell of sewage and the satisfaction of fixing a problem with your own two hands. We lived in Upper Arlington, in a two-story colonial that represented everything I'd worked for since I was 18 years old. White siding, black shutters, perfect lawn that I still mowed myself every Saturday. The garage apartment out back was something I'd added 3 years ago for my mother when her health started declining. She lived there for 18 months before the cancer took her, and it had been sitting empty since the previous year, still furnished with her things because I couldn't bring myself to clean it out. Rachel and I had what everyone at church called a model marriage. She was 44, still beautiful in that way women are when they take care of themselves without obsessing over it. She was active at Riverside Methodist Church, leading the Thursday evening addiction recovery support group with a compassion that seemed to flow from some endless well inside her. Her social work degree from Ohio State might have gone unused professionally. She'd stopped working when our daughter Sarah was born, but she poured all that knowledge into volunteer work that made a real difference in people's lives. We rarely discussed her life before we met at a church singles event 23 years ago. She'd mentioned some wild college years, made vague references to poor choices and lost time, but I'd always believed that's what made her so effective with the recovery group. She understood falling down because she'd been there. She understood redemption because she'd lived it. Or so I thought. Our life had a rhythm to it that I found comforting. Monday through Friday, I was up at 5:30, coffee and eggs, out the door by 6:30. Rachel would sleep until 7, get the kids up for school when they were younger, and now that they were older, she filled her days with volunteer work, book clubs, and maintaining our home. Evenings were dinner together when possible, though my emergency calls and her ministry work meant we probably only managed it 3 nights a week. Saturdays were for house projects and yard work. Sundays were for church and family. It was a good life, a solid life. The kind of life my father would have been proud of. It was a Tuesday in October when the first domino fell, though I wouldn't recognize it as such until much later. I came home from a particularly grueling job at a local apartment complex. 3 floors of backed-up sewage that had me and my crew there for 12 hours straight. I was exhausted, filthy despite changing clothes at the shop, and wanting nothing more than a hot shower and a cold beer. Instead, I found Rachel crying in our kitchen. Not the gentle tears of a sad movie or a touching commercial, but body-shaking sobs that had her gripping the counter like she might collapse without it. "Honey, what's wrong?" I rushed to her side, not caring that I probably still smelled like work. I wrapped my arms around her trembling shoulders, feeling her whole body shaking against mine. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, mascara running in dark streams down her cheeks. "It's Derek." The name meant nothing to me. In 22 years of marriage, I'd never heard her mention a Derek. "Who's Derek?" "Derek Hayes, from college." She wiped her nose with a tissue, her breath still hitching. "We dated for about 2 years before I met you. William, he's in terrible trouble. Something cold and unpleasant settled in my stomach, like I'd swallowed ice water too fast." "What kind of trouble?" "He's homeless in Cincinnati. He reached out to me through Facebook. He remembered I did recovery work and didn't know where else to turn. He's been fighting addiction for 3 years, lost his job at the bank 8 months ago, his family won't speak to him, the church shelter is full and winter's coming. William, he'll die on the streets. He's already been attacked twice. He's 50 pounds underweight. He's talking about ending things if something doesn't change soon." I sat down slowly on one of our kitchen stools, the ones we'd bought at a craft fair the previous summer. My mind was racing, trying to process this information. "And you want to... what exactly?" "The garage apartment is just sitting empty. We could offer it to him for a few weeks, just until he gets back on his feet. It would be the Christian thing to do. She was looking at me with those green eyes that had captured me 23 years ago, pleading now with an intensity I hadn't seen since she'd begged me to try for another child after Sarah. The Christian thing, I repeated, the words tasting strange and bitter in my mouth. You want to move your ex-boyfriend into our garage apartment? Don't make it sound like that, Rachel pleaded, fresh tears starting. This is about saving a life. What does Matthew 25:35 say? For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. What would Pastor Morrison say if he knew we had the means to help and chose not to? What would the congregation think? She had me there, and we both knew it. I'd built my reputation in this community over 2 decades as a man of faith, someone who practiced what he preached. I'd hired former addicts, given second chances, donated to every church fundraiser. The garage apartment was sitting empty, still furnished with my mother's things. Her couch, her bed, her little kitchen table where she'd eaten her meals and done her crossword puzzles. Tell me about him, I said, stalling for time while my mind raced. This Derek. How did you date for 2 years and I've never heard his name? Rachel sat down across from me, composing herself. It was a complicated time in my life. My parents hated him. He was from the wrong side of Cincinnati, worked in restaurants while putting himself through community college. They threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't break it off. I was young, scared of losing their support. So I ended it. A year later, I met you at that church event and, well, you know the rest. And now, 23 years later, he contacts you out of the blue. He said he thought of me as the one person who might understand, who might help without judging. He's been following my recovery ministry work online. He knows I understand what it's like to hit bottom. Every instinct I had was screaming that this was a bad idea. But sitting there in our kitchen, looking at my wife's tear-stained face, thinking about the empty apartment with my mother's furniture gathering dust, I found myself weakening. 1 month, I said finally. Maximum. He attends recovery meetings, looks for work, and stays out of the main house. No financial support beyond the shelter. He contributes to utilities if he's here past 2 weeks. And I want to meet him first. Rachel's face transformed with relief and gratitude. She threw her arms around me, kissing my cheek repeatedly. Thank you, thank you. You're a good man, William Foster. This is why I love you. This is why God blessed me with you. 3 days later, on a gray Friday afternoon, I stood at the Columbus Greyhound station, waiting for Derek Hayes to arrive on the bus Rachel had paid for with her personal account. She had a small inheritance from her grandmother that she used for charity work. When he stepped off, I saw exactly what I'd expected to see. A man who'd been through the absolute ringer of life. At 45, Derek looked 60. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp enough to cut paper. His eyes had that yellowed tinge of hard living, the whites more like old ivory. His hands shook with a subtle tremor that he tried to hide by shoving them in his pockets. His clothes hung loose on a frame that had clearly lost significant weight. The belt cinched tight, extra holes punched with something crude, the jacket that had probably fit once now drowning him. William, he said, extending one of those shaking hands. His voice was rougher than I'd expected, like he'd been gargling gravel. I can't thank you enough for this chance. I know how it must look, me being Rachel's ex and all, but I'm committed to getting better. I found God through all this, hit rock bottom so hard I bounced, and I'm ready to climb back up. His handshake was weak, his palms sweaty and cold. Everything about him screamed addict in recovery, which should have been reassuring. It meant Rachel had told the truth about his situation. I led him to my truck, my personal vehicle, not one of the company vans. And we drove in relative silence for the first few minutes. Let me be clear about the rules, I said as we turned onto the highway. Recovery meetings are mandatory. AA, NA, whatever you need. Daily for the first 2 weeks, minimum 3 times a week after that. You'll look for work immediately. Fast food, retail, day labor, I don't care what. Something to start building routine and responsibility. Church on Sundays is expected. The apartment is furnished. But you're responsible for your own food and personal items after this week. No visitors without my permission, no parties, no substances of any kind including alcohol. Violation of any rule means immediate eviction, no second chances. Understood completely. Derek nodded eagerly, his head bobbing like one of those dashboard dogs. I won't let you down. I won't let Rachel down. This is my last chance. I know that. Rachel tells me you worked at a bank? Fifth Third. Yeah. I was a loan officer for 12 years. Good at it too until the pills got me. Started with a back injury, legitimate prescription. You know how that story goes. I did know. I'd heard variations of it dozens of times through Rachel's ministry work. What about your family? Parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. No siblings. Ex-wife took the kids to Florida, haven't seen them in 3 years. Honestly, it's better that way. They don't need to see me like this. The garage apartment looked exactly as my mother had left it. Floral couch, doilies on every surface, pictures of Jesus and the apostles on the walls. It was dated but clean. Comfortable in that way old ladies' spaces often are. Derek stood in the doorway with his one duffel bag, looking around with what seemed like genuine gratitude. This is perfect, he said, and his voice cracked slightly. You don't know what it means to have walls and a roof after sleeping under bridges. Rachel will bring you some groceries to get started, I said. There's a bus stop 3 blocks down that goes directly to downtown. The library has computers for job applications. There's an AA meeting at St. Mark's tomorrow at noon. I'll be there, he promised. The first few weeks went exactly as planned. Derek attended meetings religiously. Rachel drove him to Thursday AA and Sunday NA without complaint, saying it was on her way to her own commitments. He submitted job applications everywhere: McDonald's, Walmart, Target, Kroger, even the car wash down the street. He came to church, sitting in the back rows in the same clothes each week, sharing his testimony when asked during the recovery support group. I had everything, he told the group one Thursday evening while I watched from the doorway. Good job, family, house in the suburbs, and I threw it all away for pills, then harder stuff when the pills weren't enough. I've been homeless for 8 months, been beaten, robbed, degraded in ways I can't even describe. But God didn't give up on me. He sent angels in the form of Rachel and William Foster, who opened their home when everyone else had closed their doors. The congregation embraced him with that particular Christian sympathy reserved for the repentant sinner. People brought him clothes, slipped him $20 bills after service, offered to pray with him. He accepted it all with humble gratitude that seemed completely genuine. I found myself warming to the situation slightly. This was what Christianity was about, wasn't it? Helping the least fortunate, offering redemption, being the hands and feet of Christ in a broken world. My initial suspicions seemed petty and unchristian in the face of Derek's apparent commitment to recovery. Rachel threw herself into helping him with an energy I hadn't seen in years. She'd cook extra portions of dinner and walk them out to the garage apartment, staying to eat with him so he wouldn't feel alone. She offered to do his laundry, helped him update his resume on her laptop, coached him through interview preparation. When I mentioned she was spending a lot of time on this project, she simply smiled and said helping others was helping her too. It gives me purpose, she explained one evening as she prepared another plate for Derek. We'd had pot roast, and she was making sure he got the best cuts. You know how empty I felt since Mom passed and the kids got older. Sarah's at college. Matthew barely needs us anymore. This reminds me why I got into social work in the first place. I'm making a real difference in someone's life. I accepted this explanation because I wanted to, because it was easier than acknowledging the small changes I'd started to notice. Rachel began dressing differently, not dramatically, but noticeably. Tighter jeans instead of her usual comfortable khakis. Blouses that showed a hint of cleavage instead of her typical crew necks. She started an exercise routine, getting up early to jog before I left for work, dropping weight she didn't need to lose. You look good, I told her one morning, watching her stretch in our bedroom. She was wearing new workout clothes, the kind that clung to every curve. She laughed, a light, girlish sound I hadn't heard in years. Helping others is better than any antidepressant. I feel alive again, William. Useful. Her makeup became more carefully applied. She started wearing perfume every day instead of just for special occasions. Not the light floral scent I'd bought her for Christmas, but something new, something muskier and more complex. When I asked about it, she said it was a sample from the department store. Too expensive to actually buy, but nice for special occasions. What's special about a Tuesday? I asked, half joking. Every day we get to help someone is special, she replied, and kissed my cheek before heading out to drive Derek to another job interview. Derek's transformation was even more dramatic. Within a month, the shaking had completely stopped. His eyes cleared, the yellow fading to white. He gained weight rapidly, 20 pounds at least, filling out his donated clothes properly. His skin lost that gray, unhealthy pallor. His hair, which had been thin and greasy, became thick and styled. "Recovery looks good on you," I told him one Sunday after church. "It's amazing what regular meals and safe sleep can do," he replied. "Plus, the folks at church have been so generous. Someone gave me a whole bag of supplements and vitamins. I feel like a new man." His clothes improved too. Not just donated items, but newer things. He claimed they were from Goodwill, bought with welfare money and food stamps he'd finally been approved for. A leather jacket that looked barely worn, jeans that fit perfectly, new work boots that couldn't have been cheap, even secondhand. "I got a job," he announced in early November, about 3 weeks after arriving. "Restaurant work, nothing fancy. Line cook at that Italian place downtown, Marcello's. Evening shifts mostly, some weekends." "That's great," I said, genuinely pleased. "How did you manage that with your record?" "The owner's in recovery himself. 15 years clean. He believes in second chances." The schedule meant Derek was gone most evenings from 4 until midnight or later. Coincidentally, Rachel's ministry schedule expanded around the same time. "I need to sponsor more people," she explained when I questioned why she was out so many evenings. "Derek's success has inspired others. I'm meeting with 3 different sponsees now, plus the regular group meetings." Her phone, which had always been an open book between us, we knew each other's passcodes, regularly used each other's devices, suddenly required privacy. "Recovery is confidential," she said when I asked why she'd changed her passcode. "These people trust me with their secrets. Their relapses, their struggles. I can't risk anyone accidentally seeing something they shouldn't." "I'm not going to snoop through your texts, Rachel. I know that. But what if you need to use my phone and a notification pops up? What if someone sees over your shoulder? I have to protect their privacy. You understand, don't you?" I did understand, or told myself I did. November arrived with its holiday chaos, and my business always exploded during this time. Frozen pipes from the first cold snaps, heating issues in old buildings, emergency calls at all hours from people hosting Thanksgiving dinners and discovering their kitchen sink wouldn't drain. I was grateful for the distraction, for the excuse to not examine too closely why Rachel and Derek were so often gone at the same time, returning separately with elaborate explanations. "Derek's at work," Rachel would say when I asked where he was during her evening absences. "I had coffee with Jennifer after her meeting. She's struggling with her husband's drinking." Rachel was at her book club, Derek would explain when I'd see him returning late and ask if he'd seen her. "I had to stay late at the restaurant." Big Party came in just before close. Their stories always checked out on the surface. The restaurant was always busy when he said it was. Rachel's sponsees would occasionally call the house, confirming their existence. But something felt off, like a picture hanging slightly crooked. Not enough to demand immediate attention, but enough to create a persistent sense of wrongness. The opportunity to discover the truth came in early December. Riverside General Hospital was undergoing a major renovation, and they needed a plumbing contractor for a 3-day presentation and bid process. December 5th through 7th in Cincinnati. It was a massive opportunity, the kind of contract that could expand our operations significantly, maybe even let me open that second location I'd been considering. "You should absolutely go," Rachel encouraged, helping me organize my presentation materials with unusual enthusiasm. She made copies of our certifications, organized our portfolio of similar projects, even helped me practice my presentation. This could change everything for the business. Derek's been stable for over a month now. I can handle things here. You sure? I know you've got a lot on your plate with the ministry. I'll be fine. Derek's working most evenings anyway, and the kids are self-sufficient. Sarah doesn't even come home from Ohio State until winter break, and Matthew's got basketball practice every night. Go. Knock them dead. The morning of December 5th, I left at 6 in the morning. Rachel stood in the doorway in her robe. Not the ratty old one she'd had for years, but a new silk one I hadn't seen before. Waving goodbye. Derek's apartment was dark, presumably because he was still sleeping after a late shift. The drive to Cincinnati took 2 hours, and I texted her when I arrived at the hotel. Her response was immediate and warm. Drive safe, love. Knock them dead. So proud of you. The presentation that afternoon went perfectly. The hospital administrators were impressed with our work samples, our competitive pricing, our safety record, and our local reputation. They asked intelligent questions that I had good answers for. By evening, I was confident we'd secure the contract. I checked into my hotel, had dinner alone at the bar while reviewing my notes for the next day, and called Rachel around 8. "How's everything at home?" I asked, noting how quiet the background was. Usually, I could hear the TV or music or something. Fine. Matthew's at practice. I'm just enjoying a quiet evening with my book. That new thriller I've been meaning to start. What about Derek? Working tonight? I assume so. His schedule varies, you know that. I haven't seen him all day. Something in her voice seemed off. Too cheerful, too eager to get off the phone. Like when the kids were teenagers and assured me everything was fine when I knew they'd thrown a party. You okay? You sound strange. Just tired. It's been a long day. I had 2 sponsee meetings and the food bank volunteer shift. I'm probably going to bed early. When I called again at 10, she didn't answer. A text came back quickly. Already in bed? Love you. Good luck tomorrow. 9 p.m. was unusually early for Rachel, who typically stayed up until midnight reading or watching her shows. She was a night owl by nature, had been since college. That nagging feeling I'd been suppressing for weeks suddenly roared to life, impossible to ignore. The next morning, December 6th, I completed the final presentation. The hospital board indicated they'd likely accept our bid, with signatures to follow within the week. Actually, I told them, I just realized I forgot some crucial documentation back at my office. Insurance certificates and bonding information. Would it be possible to return tomorrow with everything? They were completely understanding, happy to accommodate a contractor they were excited to work with. By 3 p.m., I was driving back to Columbus, having told Rachel I was staying the extra night as planned. Her response had been enthusiastic. Take your time. Enjoy Cincinnati. You deserve a break. Everything's perfect here. I parked 3 blocks from our house and approached on foot as the winter sun set early, casting long shadows through the bare trees. The neighborhood was quiet, most people still at work or inside preparing dinner. Through the kitchen window, I could see warm light and movement. As I got closer, creeping along the side of my own house like a burglar, the scene inside became clear, and my world shattered into a million pieces. Rachel and Derek were having dinner at our dining room table, the one we'd inherited from my grandmother, the one where we'd celebrated 22 Christmases and Thanksgivings. Candles were lit, wine glasses full, and they were using our wedding china, the Lenox pattern we'd registered for and rarely used because it was too nice for every day. Derek was wearing my robe, the thick terry cloth one Rachel had given me last Christmas, monogrammed with my initials on the chest. They were laughing, and as I watched, frozen in place, Rachel reached across the table to touch his hand, then leaned in for a kiss that was definitely not appropriate for a minister and her sponsee. It was passionate, familiar, the kiss of lovers who knew each other's mouths intimately. I stood there in my own backyard, my breath fogging in the cold air, watching my wife kiss another man at my table, in my house, while he wore my robe. The rage that built in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Hot and cold at the same time, making my vision narrow and my hands shake. But I forced it down, compressed it into something cold and calculating. I needed evidence. I needed to be smart. Moving quietly to the back door, I used my key to slip inside. Their voices carried clearly from the dining room, along with the clink of silverware and glasses. I can't believe we wasted 23 years, Derek was saying. His voice was different now. No trace of the rough addict's rasp. It was smooth, cultured even. We should have never let your parents break us up. I know, Rachel replied, her voice soft and intimate in a way I hadn't heard in years. But we're together now. That's what matters. We have the rest of our lives. William's a nice guy, but God, he's boring, Derek laughed. How did you stand it for so long? The same routine every day, the same missionary position every Thursday, the same conversations about work and church and the kids. By thinking of you, she admitted, by remembering what we had. The passion, the excitement. You made me feel alive then, and you make me feel alive now. These last few weeks have been like coming out of a coma. The garage apartment story was brilliant, by the way. He bought it completely. The shaking hands were a nice touch. I practiced that for weeks. Christian charity, Derek chuckled. The perfect cover. These religious types are so easy to manipulate. Wave a Bible verse at them and they'll hand over their homes. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. I pulled out my phone and started recording, stepping closer to the doorway where I could capture video along with audio. My hands were steady now, my rage crystallized into purpose. The funny thing is, Rachel continued, I actually felt guilty at first. 22 years is a long time to pretend. But then I remembered how alive you make me feel. William treats me like a piece of furniture, functional, reliable, always there. You see me as a woman. You are a woman, Derek said, and I heard chairs scraping. A beautiful, passionate woman who deserves better than a plumber, who thinks romance means letting you pick the restaurant on your birthday. Their laughter cut through me like a blade. 22 years of marriage reduced to a cruel joke between conspirators. Every anniversary, every child's birth, every struggle we'd overcome together. All of it meaningless. How much longer do we have to keep this up? Derek asked. I'm tired of pretending to be grateful for scraps. Just through the holidays. I don't want to ruin Christmas for the kids. After New Year's, I'll file for divorce. I've already consulted with an attorney, quietly. Melissa Hartman. She's supposed to be a shark. With the business being partially marital property, I should get enough to start fresh. Maybe $500,000, maybe more. And I've already got an apartment lined up, Derek added. My job isn't actually part-time. I've been assistant manager for 3 weeks now. The owner loves me. I've saved enough for first, last, and security deposit on a nice place in German Village. You were never really homeless, were you? Rachel asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Not for a second. I've been living with my sister in Cincinnati, working at her husband's restaurant, waiting for the right moment to reach out. When I saw your recovery ministry posts on Facebook, I knew exactly how to play it. 3 months of planning, creating the perfect sob story, even going to actual meetings to learn the lingo. I can recite the 12 steps backwards if you want. You always were too smart for your own good, Rachel said admiringly. Smart enough to get you back, Derek replied. That's all that matters. These last 23 years without you have been hell. I tried to move on, got married, had kids, the whole thing. But she wasn't you. Nobody could be you. What did you tell your wife? That I needed to find myself. That I was having a midlife crisis and needed space. She's staying with her mother. Thinks I'm at a meditation retreat in California. The divorce papers will be a surprise, but she'll get over it. She never really knew me anyway. Not like you do. I'd heard enough. I stepped into the dining room, my phone still recording. Don't stop on my account, I said calmly. Rachel screamed, jumping up so fast she knocked over her wine glass. The red liquid spread across my grandmother's white tablecloth like blood. Derek stood too, my robe falling open to reveal he was wearing my pajama pants underneath, the ones with the little fish on them that Sarah had given me as a joke. William, Rachel gasped, her hand at her throat. You're supposed to be in Cincinnati. Clearly, I said, maintaining that eerie calm that comes when you pass through rage and out the other side. My robe, my house, my wife. Quite the trifecta you've got going here, Derek. Derek at least had the decency to look genuinely concerned. He was calculating exits. I could see it in his eyes. but I stood between him and the front door, and the back door would mean going past me. William, I can explain, Rachel started, but I held up my hand. No need. You've explained everything quite clearly. 23 years wasted. I'm boring. The Thursday night position joke was particularly charming. I held up my phone. And I have it all recorded. Video and audio. The color drained from both their faces. Rachel sank back into her chair, her legs apparently unable to support her. Derek remained standing, pulling my robe closed like it might offer some protection. Now, I continued, let me share something with you both. While you were planning your little reunion tour, I was building a life, a business, a family, and a reputation in this community. You thought you could use my faith against me, but you forgot that even Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple. I pulled out my phone and dialed Pastor Morrison, putting him on speaker. Jim? It's William Foster. I need you to hear something. I played back the recording, every damning word echoing through the dining room. Pastor Morrison's sharp intake of breath was audible when they laughed about manipulating religious types. William, Pastor Morrison said when it finished, his voice heavy with shock and disappointment. I'm so sorry. Is this Derek Hayes, the man from the recovery program? The very same. Turns out he was never an addict, never homeless. Just Rachel's college boyfriend playing a long con to get her back. Or maybe they never really broke up. I'm not sure what's true anymore. This is a serious violation of our trust, Pastor Morrison said gravely. Rachel, if you're listening, your position with the ministry is terminated immediately. You violated the sacred trust of every person in that recovery group. Derek, you're no longer welcome at Riverside Methodist. Jim, you can't, Rachel started, finding her voice. I can and I will, he interrupted. You used our recovery program as a cover for adultery. You mocked the faith of our congregation. You turned Christian charity into a weapon. The board will meet tonight, but I can guarantee the outcome. You're done here. I hung up and looked at them both. You have 30 minutes to pack and leave. Derek, your belongings are going in garbage bags on the curb. Rachel, you can take one suitcase. I'll supervise your packing. You can't just throw me out, Rachel protested, standing up shakily. This is my house, too. I have rights. Actually, if you'd consulted a better attorney than Melissa Hartman, you'd know that adultery still matters in Ohio divorce proceedings. Especially when combined with fraud, using church donations to support your boyfriend, lying about his circumstances to obtain housing, probably embezzling from the recovery program's emergency fund. Oh, and I froze our joint accounts an hour ago. My attorney, a real one, not some strip mall divorce mill, filed emergency papers this morning. This morning? But you didn't know. I suspected. The new clothes, the changed passwords, the evening meetings that matched up too perfectly with Derek's schedule. The way you both smelled like the same new perfume. I'm not as boring or stupid as you think, Rachel. I'm just deliberate. I hired a private investigator 2 weeks ago. He's been following you both. Those evening recovery meetings? The ones at the coffee shop? He has photos of you two at a motel on Route 23. $60 a night, paid cash, registered under false names. Rachel's face went white. Derek finally spoke. You don't have to do this, man. We can work something out. The only thing we're working out is your immediate departure. Your Uber should be here in 10 minutes. Yes, I ordered it already. It's taking you to your sister's address in Cincinnati. Amazing what a private investigator can find out in a few days. Margaret Hayes, married to Tony Ricci, who owns 3 Italian restaurants. You've been working at the one on Vine Street, not Marcello's. That was another lie. Derek's facade finally cracked completely. Without a word, he headed upstairs to change. I followed him to make sure he didn't take anything that wasn't his. The watch, I said, noticing my father's Rolex on his wrist. That stays here. Rachel gave it to me. Rachel gave you something that wasn't hers to give. Take it off. He complied, his hands shaking for real this time. While he changed into his own clothes, designer jeans and a polo shirt that certainly didn't come from Goodwill, I called Rachel's parents. Her father answered on the second ring. Bob, it's William. I need you to know what's happened. I played them the recording too. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, her mother spoke. "Oh, Rachel, how could you? She needs somewhere to stay," I said. "But I understand if you're not ready for that." "She made her choice," Bob said coldly. "She can live with it. We'll pray for you, William, and the children. But Rachel, we need time to process this betrayal." Derek emerged from the bedroom in his own clothes, carrying a duffel bag that looked a lot more expensive than the one he'd arrived with. I escorted him downstairs where 3 garbage bags of his possessions waited by the door. "The Uber's here," I announced, looking at my phone. "Driver's name is Marcus, gray Toyota Camry." Derek paused at the door. "For what it's worth nothing," I cut him off. "You're a con artist who targeted my family. You used faith as a weapon. Get out." He left without another word, dragging his garbage bags behind him. I watched from the window as he loaded them into the Uber and disappeared into the night. "Good riddance to bad trash," my mother would have said. Rachel had stopped crying and was staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror at her situation. "Your turn," I said. "1 suitcase. Let's go." I followed her to our bedroom, formerly our bedroom, and watched as she packed randomly, her hands shaking. She grabbed clothes without looking, threw in toiletries haphazardly. The confident woman who'd been laughing over wine an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked every one of her 44 years, and then some. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked in a small voice. "Your sister lives in Dayton." I called her while Derek was changing. "She's expecting you, though she's not happy about it. Apparently, this isn't the first time you've blown up your life for Derek. She mentioned something about you almost dropping out of college for him." "You called everyone?" Rachel's voice broke. "You've ruined my life." "No," I said firmly. "You ruined your life. I'm just refusing to let you ruin mine too. The kids will be told the truth, age appropriately. Sarah's an adult, she can handle it. Matthew's 17, old enough to understand that actions have consequences. They'll make their own decisions about their relationship with you." Her Uber arrived as she zipped the suitcase. I walked her to the door, where she turned one last time. "I loved you," she said. "No," I replied. "You loved the stability I provided while you fantasized about him. You loved the house, the security, the reputation. You loved what I could give you, not who I was. There's a difference. 22 years, William. Doesn't that count for something?" It counted for everything to me. Which is why this betrayal is so complete. You didn't just cheat, Rachel. You turned our entire marriage into a lie. Every time you said you loved me while thinking of him, every time you kissed me after kissing him, every time you came home from those recovery meetings and slept beside me, all of it was a lie. She left without another word, rolling her suitcase down the driveway to the waiting car. I stood in the doorway until the taillights disappeared, then went back inside to face the mess they'd left behind. The dining room table still had their romantic dinner on it, the candles still flickering. I walked over and blew them out, then began the process of cleaning up. The wine stain on my grandmother's tablecloth would never come out. I threw the whole thing in the trash, along with the napkins, the placemats, everything they'd touched. I called my attorney, Mitchell Barnes, who I'd retained the week before when my suspicions became too strong to ignore. "It's done," I told him. "I have video evidence of the affair and their confession that it was all planned." "Good," Mitchell said. "The papers will be filed first thing Monday morning. With the evidence you have, this should be straightforward. Ohio's fault-based divorce laws will work in your favor. She'll get minimal assets, no alimony, and the business is completely protected." "What about the house?" "The down payment came from your inheritance. You've made every mortgage payment from your business account, and she's never contributed financially. With the adultery, you'll keep it." Next, I called Sarah at Ohio State. It was Friday night, so she was probably out with friends, but she answered on the third ring. "Dad? Everything okay? I need you to come home tomorrow. Can you do that? Is Mom okay? Are you okay? We're both alive and healthy. But something's happened, and I need to tell you in person. You're scaring me. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Just come home. Bring an overnight bag. You might want to stay the weekend." My next call was to Matthew. He was at a friend's house, supposedly studying for his calculus final. Dad? What's up? I need you home in an hour. But we're... Now, Matthew. It's important. When he arrived, I sat him down in the living room. Not the dining room, I couldn't stand to be in there, and explained what had happened. I showed him enough of the video to prove the affair without traumatizing him with details. She chose him over us, Matthew asked, his jaw clenched tight. Looking so much like me at that age, it was startling. She made a selfish choice, I said carefully. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. But she was willing to destroy our family for him, Matthew said. That tells me everything I need to know about her priorities. Where is she now? On her way to Aunt Diana's in Dayton. Good. I don't want to see her. He went to his room and I heard him on the phone, probably telling his girlfriend what happened. The news would be all over school by Monday, but there was nothing I could do about that. Sarah arrived the next morning, driving straight through from Columbus. When she saw my face, she immediately knew something terrible had happened. Where's Mom? She asked. Dayton. Sit down, sweetheart. I told her everything, showed her the same limited evidence I'd shown Matthew. She cried, which Matthew hadn't done. But her tears seemed to be more from anger than sadness. She threw away our family for some loser pretending to be homeless? Sarah asked, wiping her eyes. That's insane. That's actually insane. He wasn't really homeless. It was all an act. That almost makes it worse. At least if she was trying to save someone, there'd be some nobility in it. But this is just selfish destruction. Both kids blocked her number that day. Her attempts to reach them through social media were similarly rebuffed. When she tried to come to the house the next week, she found the locks had been changed and a restraining order was in place. The church community rallied around us in ways I hadn't expected. Meals appeared on our doorstep daily. Offers of help with Christmas preparations flooded in. The recovery ministry was restructured with new leadership and strict oversight protocols. Several people from the group reached out to say they'd suspected something but hadn't wanted to cause trouble without proof. Derek always seemed too smooth, one recovering addict told me. His story changed slightly each time he told it. And he never had that look, you know? That hollow-eyed, desperate look we all have when we're really in it. Rachel's fall from grace was swift and complete. Word spread through the Methodist network. Adultery was bad enough, but using a recovery ministry as cover for an affair was unforgivable. She couldn't find a church in Ohio that would accept her in any leadership capacity. Her reputation was destroyed overnight. Derek, true to form, disappeared completely within 2 weeks. His sister Margaret called me, apologizing profusely. I had no idea, she said. He told me he was having a midlife crisis, needed to find himself. I thought letting him work at Tony's restaurant would help. I never imagined he was using us as a base to destroy your family. Where is he now? Gone. Cleaned out his room while we were at church, left a note saying he had an opportunity in Seattle. Haven't heard from him since. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Rachel's attorney, Melissa Hartman, turned out to be competent enough to realize they had no case. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just the video, but the private investigators' photos, credit card records showing motel charges, phone records showing hundreds of texts and calls between them. Rachel tried to claim she'd been manipulated, that Derek had taken advantage of her compassionate nature. But the recording made it clear she was a willing participant, even a co-conspirator. I actually felt guilty at first, her own words played back in court. 22 years is a long time to pretend. She got 20% of our liquid assets, about $50,000, and nothing else. No alimony, no share of the business, no claim to the house. Her car was in her name, so she kept that. Everything else stayed with me. By February, she was working data entry at a medical billing company in Dayton, living in her sister's basement, and attending a small church where nobody knew her story, at first. But the internet is forever, and when someone Googled her name after she volunteered for their youth program, the whole story came out. She was politely asked to worship elsewhere. She wrote me letters, long, rambling apologies that I returned unopened. She tried to reconcile with the kids, but they weren't interested. 22 years of being a good mother didn't erase the betrayal of destroying their family for a con artist. She made her choice, Sarah said when Rachel sent her a birthday card with a long letter inside. I'm making mine. In April, almost exactly 6 months after that October day when Rachel first mentioned Derek's name, I received a call from a detective in Seattle. Mr. Foster? I'm Detective James Park with Seattle PD. We have a Derek Hayes in custody for fraud. Your name came up in our investigation. What did he do? Convinced a widow that he was a grief counselor who'd lost his own wife, moved into her guest house, gained access to her accounts, stole nearly $50,000 before she discovered the truth. We're building a case and would like your testimony about your experience. Absolutely, I said without hesitation. When do you need me? The trial was in August. I flew to Seattle, testified about our experience, and watched as 3 other women told similar stories. Derek Hayes, which wasn't even his real name it turned out, was actually Dennis Hayward from Florida. He'd been running romance scams for over a decade, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts across the country. He was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and theft. The judge, a stern woman who looked like she'd seen too much of humanity's worst, sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison. Mr. Hayward, she said, you've made a career out of exploiting loneliness and compassion. You've weaponized love itself. 5 years is the maximum I can give you, and I wish it were more. Rachel wrote me after the verdict, a single line. I was a victim too. I actually wrote back this time. No, you were a volunteer. By Christmas that year, our new normal had solidified. Sarah was in graduate school studying criminal justice with a focus on fraud prevention. I want to stop people like Derek, she said. Or Dennis, whatever his name really is. Matthew was at Kent State in engineering, determined to build things that lasted. Dad, you know what I learned from all this? He told me during winter break. That foundations matter more than facades. You can make something look good on the surface, but if the foundation is rotten, it'll all come crashing down eventually. I'd started dating Patricia, a divorce teacher from church who understood that trust had to be earned slowly. She'd been cheated on too, though not as elaborately as I had been. We took things slow, neither of us in a rush to repeat our mistakes. I Googled you, she admitted on our 3rd date. The whole story's online. The church newsletter, the Seattle trial coverage. I'm sorry you went through that. It's part of my story now, I said. I can't change it, only learn from it. We had Christmas dinner in the dining room, at a new table I'd bought from a local craftsman. The old one, my grandmother's table, was too tainted by that night. Sarah and Matthew were there, along with Patricia and her teenage daughter. We ate Chinese takeout because nobody felt like cooking, and we laughed at stories that didn't include Rachel. She spent that Christmas alone. Her parents had softened enough to call, but not enough to invite her home. Her sister was traveling with her family to Disney World. Derek was in prison. The kids maintained their silence. She posted on Facebook about gratitude and redemption, but the comments were sparse. Some betrayals echoed too long for easy forgiveness. 2 years later, I stood in my church's front pew, watching Patricia walk down the aisle toward me. My kids were my best man and maid of honor. The ceremony was simple, the vows carefully crafted to acknowledge that we were both bringing baggage but choosing to help each other carry it. Rachel wasn't invited, obviously, but I heard she watched the live stream from her apartment in Dayton. She'd moved out of her sister's basement but still worked the same data entry job. Dating was impossible. A quick Google search of her name brought up the whole sordid story, thanks to the church newsletter that had delicately explained her departure and the Seattle trial coverage that was less delicate. Derek was released after 3 years for good behavior. He immediately violated parole by disappearing. Last anyone heard, he was in Florida, working at a beach resort, probably scanning for his next mark. He never contacted Rachel again. Their great love story, 23 years in the making, had lasted exactly 3 months. The garage apartment is still my office. I refinished it completely, no trace of its time as Derek's supposed recovery sanctuary. Sometimes I work late, preparing bids or reviewing contracts, And I think about how differently everything could have gone. If I'd said no to helping Derek, if I'd paid attention to the warning signs earlier, if Rachel had been honest about her feelings years ago, if, if, if. But that's the thing about betrayal. It makes you question everything that came before it. Were there signs I missed? Was our entire marriage a lie, or did it only become one when Derek reappeared? I'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. My hands are still rough from working with pipes. They always will be. But now they're also careful, wise, experienced. They know the difference between fixing and enabling, between helping and being used. They've learned that some things can't be repaired, only replaced, and that knowing the difference is the beginning of wisdom. The business thrives. We have contracts with 3 hospitals now, 2 universities, and dozens of commercial properties. I employ 30 people, including 2 of Derek's actual victims from other cities. Women who really were struggling, who really did need help, and who deserved better than to be used as props in his cons. Sarah graduated and works for the FBI now, specifically in their white-collar crime division. She says watching her mother fall for a con artist taught her to recognize the signs. She's engaged to a fellow agent, a good man who knows our whole story and loves her anyway. Matthew became a structural engineer, specializing in foundation repair. The metaphor isn't lost on anyone. He says learning that his parents' marriage was built on sand taught him to always check what's underneath before building anything. Patricia and I built something different than what I had with Rachel. It's not the young, naive love of first marriage. It's the careful, conscious choice of 2 people who know what betrayal costs and choose trust anyway. We have separate bank accounts and a joint one for household expenses. We have passwords we share and spaces we keep private. We have honest conversations about difficult things because we've both learned that avoiding hard truths leads to harder consequences. Sometimes I drive past the house in Upper Arlington where it all fell apart. New owners have it now, a young family who probably doesn't know about the drama that unfolded in their dining room. The garage apartment is a children's playroom, I heard, full of toys and laughter instead of lies and schemes. Rachel still writes occasionally, not letters anymore, emails that go to a folder I check quarterly, just in case there's something legally significant. They're all variations on the same theme: apology, justification, plea for forgiveness, subtle blame shifting. She's in therapy, she says. She's found herself, she claims. She understands what she lost, she insists. Her last email mentioned that she'd seen Derek. Not in person, on a true crime podcast about romance scams. He was calling himself David Harrison now, serving 7 years in California for convincing an entrepreneur that he was a venture capitalist who'd lost everything in a bad investment and needed a place to stay while he rebuilt. Same playbook, different stage. I was such a fool, she wrote. I threw away everything real for something that was never more than a performance. He played me just like he played those other women. I see that now. I didn't respond, but I did forward it to my attorney, just in case. Patricia saw it too. We don't keep secrets, having learned their cost. Do you think she really understands? Patricia asked. I think she understands that she lost, I replied. Whether she understands why is another question. The truth is, I don't think about Rachel much anymore. She's become a cautionary tale, a reminder to trust but verify, to love but not blindly. The 22 years we spent together feel like someone else's life now, a story I heard once about people I used to know. The recovery program at Riverside Methodist continues, stronger than ever with its new safeguards and protocols. I still volunteer there occasionally, sharing my story when it might help someone. Not the details, those are too personal and too painful, but the lessons. That predators come in many forms, that compassion without boundaries is dangerous, that sometimes the person who needs recovery isn't who they claim to be. Last month, a woman came to the program saying her ex-boyfriend needed help, that he was struggling with addiction and homelessness. The new protocols kicked in immediately. Background check, verification of story, references required. Turned out he was lying about the homelessness but not the addiction. He got help, but not housing. Boundaries protected everyone. How did you know to check? The woman asked me after we'd sorted out the truth. Experience, I said simply. Expensive experience. It's been 5 years now since that December night when I stood in my backyard and watched my world shatter through a kitchen window. 5 years since I learned that 22 years of marriage could be undone by 3 months of deception. 5 years since Rachel chose a fantasy over family. The Foster family endures, different but intact. We survived the charity case catastrophe not because we were strong, but because we were willing to rebuild from truth rather than maintain a lie. Sarah has her own family now, a daughter who will grow up knowing that trust must be earned and verified. Matthew married his college sweetheart in a ceremony that was everything my first wedding wasn't. Honest, grounded, real. Patricia and I are planning our retirement, scaling back the business to enjoy travel and time with grandchildren. We're thinking of selling the company to my foreman, Marcus, who's been with me for 10 years and understands that reputation is built with consistency and destroyed with single choices. Rachel remains in Dayton, from what I hear through the church network that still tracks such things. Same job, same apartment, same solitary existence. She volunteers at a food bank, attends a small church where she sits in the back row, and lives with the consequences of choosing a con man over a commitment. Derek, or Dennis, or David, or whatever he's calling himself now, is in federal prison again, this time for 10 years. He was caught running an elaborate scheme involving fake hurricane relief charities. The pattern never changes, just the disguise. He's 53 now, looking at release when he's 63, his prime con years behind him. I wonder sometimes if he thinks about Rachel, about the woman who gave up everything for 3 months of his attention. Probably not. For him, she was just another Mark who happened to mark herself. The garage apartment stands empty now, cleaned out and waiting. Patricia thinks we should convert it to a real guest space for when the grandchildren visit. I agree, but I haven't started the renovation yet. There's something about keeping it as my office, as the space where I rebuilt myself after the collapse, that feels important. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working there, I think about that October evening when Rachel first mentioned Derek's name. How different would life be if I'd said no immediately? If I'd listened to my instincts instead of my scripture, but then I remembered that the scripture wasn't wrong. Helping others is good. Rachel and Derek were wrong for twisting that goodness into a weapon. The fault wasn't in the compassion, but in the deception. That's the real lesson of the charity case catastrophe, that good intentions can be exploited, but that doesn't make them less good. It just means we need to be wiser about how we implement them. Trust, but verify. Help, but with boundaries. Love, but with eyes open. My hands are rough from working pipes, calloused from years of honest labor. They've built a business, raised a family, rebuilt a life. They've learned to distinguish between what can be fixed and what must be replaced. They've learned that some breaks are too complete to repair, that sometimes the kindest thing is to let go and start fresh. The Foster family endures. We're smaller than we were, but stronger. We're careful with our trust, but generous with our love. We've learned that family isn't just blood. It's choice, commitment, and showing up even when it's hard. Every Christmas, we gather around the new dining room table, Sarah and her family, Matthew and his wife, Patricia and me. We eat too much, laugh too loud, and create new memories that have nothing to do with the past. We don't talk about Rachel or Derek or the implosion that brought us here. We talk about the future, about grandchildren and retirement plans and the trips we want to take. But every Christmas Eve, I stand in the garage apartment, my office now, and allow myself one moment of what if. What if Rachel had been honest? What if our marriage had been real? What if Derek had actually been homeless, actually needed help, actually deserved compassion? Then I close that door, literally and figuratively, and return to the family that chose to stay, that chose truth over comfort, that chose to rebuild rather than pretend. The charity case catastrophe nearly destroyed us. But in the end, it revealed who we really were. Not the perfect Christian family we'd pretended to be, but something better. A real family that faced the worst and survived. And that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.